the policies to control inflation and deflation. So, guys, we had a little discussion about this yesterday. We said that when you look at policies to control inflation, they could be demand side policies or they could be supply side policies, right? And we said demand side policies are very useful when you want to manage AD, but they may not be good for managing what we call supply side cost push inflation. So, if you look at demand pull inflation when AD is too high, and here we can do what we call contractionary fiscal and monetary policy. However, supply side policies, the biggest advantage of them is just that they not only work for cost push inflation, but they also work for demand pull inflation. Because when the AD is going up, you can see this, guys, from a diagram that if the AD is going up, for example, something like this, AD naught and AS naught, if AD is going up, right, this is causing demand pull inflation. And when you make the aggregate supply curve shift to the right, that can result in the inflation to be under control. Does that make sense? So when AD go up, AS curve can be shifting, and that could actually be useful. Make sense? Any questions? Here is this that if you look at it from the discussion here, uh, when you look at demand pull inflation may only be can be tackled through demand side policies. But the good thing about supply side policies is this: it can control both demand pull and cost push inflation. So one advantage we need to remember. Now, for an economy that is in macroeconomic equilibrium, there are two ways in which prices can rise. We said this that they could be a leftward shift of the AS curve, which is cost push inflation, or rightward shift of the AD curve, which is demand pull inflation. Um, Anti-inflationary policies are those policies that are trying to reduce inflation, and depending on what kind of inflation we're looking at, if we're looking at demand pull inflation because of excess demand, then appropriate policy would be to reduce AD. Isn't that true? The government would use what we call deflationary fiscal policy or contractionary fiscal policy or contractionary or deflationary monetary policy. So deflationary and contractionary is the same thing. So you might use deflationary fiscal and monetary policy. What is fiscal policy? Increase government increase taxes or lower government spending, while monetary policy is increasing interest rate to reduce the money supply and reduce the money supply. Is this chapter coming in the marks? And the answer is Ibrahim, no. Nope, it's not coming in the test, but it's a very important topic. What is the evaluation of anti-inflationary policy? From a political standpoint, guys, such policies are not so popular. Look at first the fiscal policy. Fiscal policy is not desirable to begin with because you're kind of like cutting down government expenditure on public goods and merit goods and so on. Yes, it's a very important topic for CIE. This is the last topic. Policies are very popular as a topic to be tested. Okay, looking first at fiscal policy, guys, a voting population is unlikely to be happy to accept higher taxes, and that would basically mean government can lose popularity if they put in too many taxes. Similarly, a reduction in government spending can also result in people to be unhappy because government spending being lower means government is providing you less public and merit goods. So one thing for sure is this that uh, uh, when you are trying to make the AD go down through fiscal policy, it's not that popular to begin with. Even when you look at monetary policy, it also has a problem. But let's talk about one more point that it takes a very long time for the government to bring about a change in its fiscal policy. We also argue this that fiscal policy is not like a quick fix because the way you get that to happen, there is a lot of basically time period involved in negotiating. For example, budgets are developed, and then after the budgets, they go through the legislation, which means the senators have to approve it, and there could be oppositions to any budget cuts and so on and so forth. Once it has gone through the political process of the Senate and so on, in Pakistan's case, for example, then it would be approved. Once it's approved, then it will come to the market, and it may take a very long time. So there are long time lags involved in the contractionary policy to bring about a decrease in aggregate demand. So we believe that AD doesn't really change that quickly because fiscal policy goes through what we call a political process. Also, when you look at monetary policy, high interest rates is also going to harm some people. Like when you're doing AD curve to shift to the right, it's going to take some time. It's going to be harmful for some people. For example, let's say if I've taken a mortgage, which means a loan on the houses, or if I've taken a sort of car loan, clearly the price that I'm paying for my interest will be high. Higher interest rate would mean higher loan and mortgage repayments, and therefore will be very unpopular. Especially in the developed countries, people buy houses through mortgage more so, and therefore there this is not a popular move when you are trying to increase the interest rates because suddenly people are paying a larger price on their loans. So if you're a government that is planning to be re-elected, you might not go into expenditure dampening policy. And remember, expenditure dampening policy, I'm sorry, reducing AD, which is also expenditure dampening in a way, reducing AD causes your GDP to go down and unemployment to go up as well. Nowadays, monetary policy is considered to be the most effective way of managing AD in the economy, and changes in interest rate are considered to be the best weapon to fight inflation. So, if you look at inflation, a lot of countries try to use monetary policy as opposed to fiscal policy, because between fiscal and monetary policy, fiscal policy uh, can have a deeper impact on the poor people and on a large segment of people. Uh, Also, fiscal policy is kind of like channel to like provide public goods and managed goods, and you don't want to sort of affect that kind of a thing. So fiscal policy is not seen to be as effective as monetary policy in battling inflation. It would be very difficult for government to reduce spending because of their commitment to people or public. Moreover, even if government could reduce their spending, it would take a long time. So between fiscal and monetary policy, governments are relying more on monetary policy than fiscal policy. But guys, if inflation is of cost push nature, then demand side policies are basically not desirable. What you need to do is what we call supply side policy. So we wrote here that if inflation is of cost push nature, then if deflationary demand side policy may bring down the price level, but will result in lower level of national output. And that's exactly, if you look at this diagram, guys, that if if you look at this diagram, that if your demand pull cost push inflation was happening, as if this was my AD and AS, and let's say cost push inflation was happening, so AS curve would be shifting backward. So this is my price level going up. You can't do a demand side policy, because if you do a demand side policy, let me choose another color. If you do a demand side policy, you will only end up causing GDP to fall further. So you will see further unemployment to happen. So it was Y naught, it became Y1, and then becomes Y2. So in deflationary policy, be it fiscal or monetary, may not be the good thing. The only thing, if you're doing with when there is cost push inflation, you will basically be using supply side policies. So therefore, demand side policies are ineffective, and supply side policies are the appropriate policies to deal with cost push inflation. So remember this, that demand pull inflation cannot be, the cost push inflation can be tackled through demand side policies. However, when inflation does occur, it is distinguished to figure out whether it's demand side policy and cost push. Right now, I am saying that if demand side policy, if demand pull inflation happens, you use demand side policies and blah blah. But what if we don't know the reason why inflation is happening? So that's why policymakers normally need to use a mix of solutions, unless you know the cause very clearly. So then of course you can use the appropriate policy, but if you don't know the cause, then you need to use a mix of policies to figure out what is working for your economy. Make sense? Last point, guys, a significant problem facing governments is a possible trade-off between different policy objectives, and we saw this that when you use demand side policies, you are able to, if you're able to control inflation, you may be able to control inflation and x minus m, but the trade off is between economic growth and unemployment. Okay, so they may want to fight inflation by bringing about a decrease in AD, but this may result in a higher level of unemployment. If they try to fight unemployment and increase economic output, AD will go up, but it may cause inflation. So there is always this trade off that happens between demand side policies. So the verdict out there, and this is a very important evaluation for you to remember, the verdict is, if you really want a country to prosper, use supply side policies. If you want a country to get competitive advantage, use supply side policies. If you want to see economic growth, use supply side policies. If you don't want any trade off to happen, use supply side policies. However, supply side policies require not short run but long run, number one. Number two, supply side policies are going to be expensive because you're trying to educate the whole economy, you're trying to bring training to the economy, and so on and so forth. It's not going to be cheap. And so, this is an important thing to remember. So, the medicine for all sort of woes is basically supply side policies because they can work really well. The only problem is that they don't work, they don't show their results in the short run, they show the result in the long run. And from a government perspective, which is, like looking at a 5 year sort of term, or supply side policies may not win them votes. And so from a political perspective, they might not be the way to go forward. But if you are, for example, not worried about re-election, right? So supply side policies are the only thing that can come bring an economy come out of uh, poverty, come out of underdevelopment, and so on. Make sense? Any questions, guys? If there is no question, then I have to move on to show you something. Let's do some exam questions. We have time. We are done with our course, so congratulations, everyone. Um, if it's a moment of congratulations, but um, Mubarak ho aap sabko. The course is complete. Let's look at some exam questions, and as promised, we will be doing some data responses as well. Let me pull out virtual virtual chairs again. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You have no idea how amazing it is a feeling for a teacher to have the course finished. You know what I mean? You're not stressed anymore. Anyways, just 1 minute, guys. Let me just pull out the file. Sorry, guys, I was opening the wrong. 1 minute. This is taking ages for some reason. Um, Yeah, analyze how fiscal and monetary policy could be used to solve the problem of deflation, assess which policy is likely to be more effective. So, we can talk about the what is fiscal policy, which is change in G or change in T, right? We can talk about monetary policy, which is change in money supply. And because this is deflation, so we'll define what deflation is, where the AD is going down. And so what you need to do is we need to use what we call expansionary fiscal and monetary policy, which will make the AD to go up, right? So, what is expansionary monetary policy, guys? In an expansionary monetary policy, we will make money supply to go down so that interest rate will fall, so that C goes up, I go up, and therefore AD goes up. Similarly, fiscal policy, what we'll try to do is basically G to go up or T to go down, and that will make the AD to go up. Now, assess which policy is likely to be more effective, guys. We just discussed this. So, what do you think? Which policy will be likely to be more effective, or which policy in evaluation? What will you write? Remember, fiscal policy is going to be, because it's an expansionary policy. Fiscal policy is going to be more politically more popular. Number one. Secondly, fiscal, because this is an opposite argument of inflation. So number two is this, that um, between fiscal and monetary policy, fiscal policy can be politically more sort of popular, but it may take a long time because the budget and the approval and legislation. So there could be a time lag when it comes to fiscal policy. Monetary policy can be quick to be implemented, yeah, and that can make the AD to go to the right. So reducing interest rate could be a very quick way. You can talk about basically the trade-offs that can exist in fiscal and monetary policy. Secondly, you can also talk about one more thing, okay? That when you're doing expansionary fiscal policy, government can run into what we call sometimes budget deficits, you know, which means the government may end up, borrowing money, and that could be another problem that can happen. And monetary policy, guys, we had a feedback about monetary policies, which that monetary policy sometimes, if you have a fixed exchange rate regime, uh, yes, very good job, very good job. I mean, this is exactly what I wanted to say as well. That when you're looking at fixed exchange rate regime, using monetary policy may not be an option available for you because you are using it to manage your demand. Very good job, Shamir. Uh, you mentioned the point that I was thinking as well. So this could be a very good answer that you can write, basically. Yeah. Similarly, discuss the ways in which expenditure reducing or expenditure switching policies attempt to reduce current account deficits. So this is very easy. Also, you talk about expenditure reducing is basically contractionary fiscal and monetary policy, and expenditure switching is your import control and your devaluation, right? And talk about uh, pros and cons of this, and this could be another good question to prepare for. Similarly, look at this one. Explain the difference between fiscal and monetary policy. Show how each can be used to increase AD. That's a very easy question again. Discuss whether supply side policy is more likely to be successful than fiscal policy when economy is faced with inflation. So talk about how supply side policies can deal with both demand pull inflation and cost pull. So first you explain what supply side policies are, how they can fix both demand side and cost side of inflation. However, how both these policies, supply side policies is long run, supply side policies may be expensive, but fiscal policy, if you're dealing with fiscal policy, you can get the result, but fiscal policy require, government intervention. It's deeply unpopular. It could also lead to issues of, trade-off. Uh, you might be able to control inflation, but you might not be able to see economic growth and unemployment to be controlled, and so on and so forth. So this is another question that you can do. So guys, this topic is a very important topic. A lot of recent year questions have come from this. I'm not testing it on the in the mocks, but from an importance perspective, it's a very important topic to prepare for. Make sense? Any questions? Are we good to move on? Wasif, sorry, was you asking something? Okay. Zamin, the important topics basically for heirs economics, honestly speaking, for me, government intervention, elasticity, um, and demand and supply chapter from micro is really important. In macro, I'm looking at inflation. Honestly, in macro, there's no choice to basically do because you can be tested on anything. So for me, you don't have that kind of sort of luxury that you can skip something and you can't focus on another thing and so on, because everything is so interconnected. Okay guys, I'm done. I'm going to see you guys tomorrow. We're going to do two data responses, and uh, I'm going to send you guys one file of the ones that we'll discuss. Okay, thank you guys, have a good one. Bye bye. No, Bilal, that's not possible. I don't give you answers, handwritten answers. We discuss outlines. We don't give answers. I do have something which can help you. I do have a model essays. Let me send you guys the model essays as well. Okay. Have a good one, guys. Bye bye.